happened to your son in the shortest little bit that you can, when it was, just like the backstory of that.
December 2nd, 2013. It was exactly 4:30 because I was just backing my chair up at work, and there was a call that I didn't know whose number it was, and I thought, oh, that was timing. And so I answered it, and he had said, this is Detective Jason Montgomery, and he wanted to ask me a few questions and about my ex-husband, actually. And I'm like, you know, I gotta get my kids from daycare. And then he says, well, there's been a shooting. And I said, does this have anything to do with my son? And he says, who's your son? And he said, Jordan LeBeau. And I said, Jordan LeBeau. And he said, well, you need to come on down to the station. So by the time I got down there, I went to the wrong building, asked for the wrong detective, and finally found where I was going to go. And Detective Montgomery took me into a little room that was there. And before he even got the door shut, I said, where is Jordan? And he said, Jordan is dead. And I just remember falling to the floor and screaming out. And I just looked at him. I said, you're lying to me. And he said, I'm not lying. And then that's how I found out he had died. And then I had called my friends and my pastor, and they had come up there. And I had called Jordan on the way to there because I didn't know that anything had happened to him. And I was just being really calm. I'm like, Jordan, something's wrong with your dad. You need to call me. Where are you? Because I'd already texted him about 10 times. And you know, I just remember, you know, and we haven't gotten his cell phone back yet, but I thought I'd like to see if that message is as calm as I feel like I was as a mom. You know, something's wrong with your dad. You need to call me. And
Talk about, do you remember the last time you saw him, like what your last conversation with him was?
I do. I remember the last conversation, and I remember my last text. The Tuesday before he passed away on a Monday, the Tuesday before he came out to Hartford to go to Morgan's middle school play. And my phone was dead because I wanted to take their picture, and I couldn't take their picture together because I just remember him giving her this hug, and he said, I am so proud of you, afterwards. And then he reached in, he gave her another hug, and I'm like, that is so awesome because, you know, I mean, they're 20 and, you know, middle school, and I'm like, that is so great because she just felt so loved when he said, I'm so proud of you. And that's just how he made his brother and sister always feel, was that he just absolutely loved them. And my last text, 2 nights before he died, we were texting back and forth, and the last thing he texted me was, love you to the moon and back. And I said, love you like the sunshine. And he says, aww. So that was my very last text from him. Yeah. The next night he was texting my daughter, and I didn't text him back. I was just about sleeping, and I thought, oh, I'll just let them text. So the night before he died, they texted. And then I felt kind of bad, because I'm like, I didn't get to text him. But, you know, it was a gift that Morgan had that, you know, because she told him, I love you. And he said, I love you more. And then he's like, no way, Jose. So they got to have that the night before he passed away.
Is that something you always did with him?
Oh, yeah, yeah. And he was living in Sioux Falls, but we messaged or talked almost every day.
What was something about Jordan that just made him stand out as a kid?
You know, as a kid, he was just always so laid back and calm, and he's just nice, I believe, to everybody. I know even after he passed away, it's like I had so many people tell me that Jordan was their best friend. And I think that's how he made so many people feel, is that, you know, he made them feel special, that they were his best friend.
He was 19?
20.
What was he doing? Like, was he in school then? What was he hoping to do with life, you know?
I think right then he was at a time where he was just kind of at a loss, where he didn't know what he wanted to do. He wanted a body shop. He wanted to work in a body shop. And he had started school for that, but he hadn't continued on with that.
Yeah. Anything you want to say about what happened? And I mean, did you know anything about, you know, tell me the details of the case a little bit. Did you know anything? In my understanding, if I remember right, it was all just a big misunderstanding, kind of? Like they thought...
Well, no, I don't think there was a misunderstanding. I think his girlfriend had mentioned it to a few other people, 2 of them being Doug and Kevin, and that Jordan had money, and she took a picture of where the money was and everything. And they couldn't rob him because then Jordan would know who robbed him, so they asked some people from Watertown, asked Brian, and Brian recruited Trevor to rob him. And then they were there like the day after Thanksgiving and checked out where he lived and everything. And another one of Jordan's, what I would have considered to be his good friends, who was in a tiff with him over a girl, showed them where he lived, because none of them knew where Jordan lived. And so then December 2nd, they went to his house, and the two from Del Rapids drove off, and Trevor and Brian broke into the window. And when they broke into the window going into the laundry room. When they opened that door, Jordan was around the corner and hit Brian, who was coming out first. And then they were wrestling him, and Brian apparently had dropped the gun, and then Trevor picked it up, and I believe he set it on the washer or the dryer. And because he's the one that shot Jordan, but he's the least likely person you would expect that from him after sitting through trial with him. And I mean, I think, there was so much going on, and I certainly wasn't there, but when Brian says, Jason was beating up on Brian because they were trying to beat up on Jordan and trying to tie him up with duct tape, and Brian says, shoot him, and Trevor shot Jason, and then Jordan lunged at him and shot Jordan, and Jordan died, and Jason was there and saw him take his last breath. And then Jason crawled up the stairs because he had been shot to get his cell phone, because that was upstairs, because he had just gotten home from work. And before his dad even got home, Jordan said, you guys need to leave, my dad's going to be here any minute. And they didn't believe him, because they were told Jason got off work at 5 o'clock, but he didn't. He got off work at 2, and it was 2:15. And so even in his last moments, it's like he could have saved these boys. And they could have left, and they didn't.
Like, this sounds like something out of a gangster movie. Is this ever something that you ever thought?
No, never. I would have never even thought something like this would happen. I mean,
can you even wrap your mind around the somebody breaking in, trying to tie him up with duct tape, like that's it. Like, I remember those details, and it just seems unreal.
Yeah. And even when they got to the house, they hadn't even taken the cellophane off the duct tape yet. That's how much I think they didn't really think it through. So why a loaded gun? I'm not sure why they had to have the gun loaded. I don't know. That's the one question that I always wonder.
Were there drugs involved? Was somebody high? Were they, do you know what led to this? Why?
Greed is what led to it. In fact, recently I spoke with Kevin Rice, and I wanted to ask him if he liked Jordan, but I didn't want to say, do you like Jordan? Because that was such a leading question. So finally in my head, while I'm thinking this through, I said, how do you feel about Jordan? And he said, I always liked Jordan. He says, it wasn't anything about Jordan. It wasn't at all about Jordan. He said it was about the money. He said it was greed. They wanted the money. They wanted to split it up. They didn't want Jordan to have it. And Jordan was always a saver. I mean, since he was little, he saved money. These boys and the girl, they spent their money. I mean, they bought lots of toys and four-wheelers and stuff like that. And that wasn't what Jordan did. He saved money. And that's became his downfall.
I mean, it's crazy that your son lost his life over, I'm sure, just a few $1,000 in savings.
Yeah, well, it was $88,000.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he saved. I would have never known he had that kind of money. I didn't have any clue.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about, what were your initial emotions and reactions after you found out that he had been killed?
I was mad. I was angry. I was mad every day. I mean, every day for that first year. I mean, you ask my kids, you can ask my coworkers. I mean, I was mad. I was angry all the time. And we went through so many different courts, and, and I couldn't get over the anger. And I just prayed to God all the time. It's like, take this anger away. And I just thought, I'm going to be angry for the rest of my life. I believed that, because I thought, there's no way. I mean, I was just so mad. And then I will never forget, it was in November, a year after Jordan died. He died December 2nd. It was in the middle of November. It was a Sunday morning. And I remember just laying on my bed, and I had woke up, and I just remember looking up at the ceiling, and I was like, I'm not mad. I'm like, that's weird. I don't feel angry. And then I just kind of went about my day. And then I woke up Monday morning, and I remember looking at the ceiling, and I'm like, I don't feel mad. And then it was just like, wow, it's like God took my anger away. And it was after that that he put it on my heart that I needed to forgive these people. And I was like, no. And I mean, court was coming up in 2 weeks, and I thought, no, I am not going to go into court and forgive them. I'm like, how could you even, I mean, I just felt like that's what he wanted me to do. I'm like, how could you even ask that of somebody? I mean, I'm not going to do it publicly. I mean, I can just say it in my mind, I forgive them. But then I knew saying it in my mind wasn't going to really get, you know, me past the anger and everything. And 2 weeks later was Trevor Krudoff's sentencing. And I went up there and I told him about Jordan. I told him about when Jordan was younger and, you know, the things that he did and how he would send me daisies to work because he knew those were my favorite. And I just told him different things about Jordan and Morgan and their last times with him. And then I told him that God commands me to forgive you, and I forgive you. And I referenced Colossians 3:13. And then there was 3 more times. I did it 3 more times for then Kevin Rice and Doug Skolton and Faith Rasmussen.
4 times.
Mm-hmm.
4 people fully involved in your son's murder.
Yes.
What was that like, that moment in the courtroom? Especially that first time, but then every time afterwards, did it get easier? What was that like for you?
You know, it was really different every time because there was different, it's like the people involved were different. It's like, you know, I mean, just listening to their hearts. I mean, I really feel like, you know, they all have, you know, a lot of sorrow. It's nothing they ever expected would ever happen, and nothing they planned to happen. Like I said, I still don't have the answered question on why they had to load the gun. You know, why not just send a gun without it being loaded? But because they never planned to hurt Jordan. I mean, they never planned to kill Jordan. You know, and it just, with Jason coming home and just all of everything going on, and you know, I think Trevor just, with Brian saying, shoot him, you know, and I don't believe Brian even planned for Jordan to die. It was just all in the time of the emotion.
Did Brian or Trevor know Jordan before this?
No, neither one of them had ever met Jordan. And going through Trevor's trial, he had the case, not trial, but he had the court date for whether he was going to be an adult or a juvenile. And then listening to his parents as well speak of him, I thought, this could be Jordan. I mean, he was a nice kid. I mean, you know, quiet kid. I mean, it could have been Jordan. I mean, you know, just get hooked up with the wrong crowd, and, you know, and then that's what happens.
How can you, so I've been to many court cases and I've seen people listen to that. How did you see these people who killed your son and see them as people and not as monsters?
It was only because of God. Because, like I said, I was so mad and so angry, and it's like God just took that away, and he was able for me to see them for the people they are, and I listened to them in court. And I mean, if you just listen to their heart, it's like they're not these monsters. I mean, they made some really bad decisions, and I mean, it's just, I don't believe that they were bad people. They just made some really bad choices and got hooked up with drugs.
Wow. Okay, because this is taking forever. I'm going to have you go on. There's so much of your story. There's like crazy amount of your story. Let's talk about what you did after that. Do you want to share that moment of the hug with the one who didn't get convicted?
Okay.
Yeah.
Doug Skolton, who was convicted but didn't have any prison time, he was sentenced to 30 years, but it was doesn't have to serve that. And I did go and listen to him speak. That was one of the things the judge had put on, that he had to speak at different places. And I went and listened to him at O'Gorman High School and listened to him speak. And I listened to his whole entire story. And, you know, there was different, you know, different things in there, than what I've heard at some things. And some things were just so genuine. I just thought, he really is making a change in his life and wanting to do the right things. And I believe he is. I mean, I haven't spoken to him since I saw him at that high school, but listening to him that day, I feel he is. And I don't know if he even knew I was there that day. And I just remember one of the things he said was, because I had given him a hug in court, and in the court, not in the courtroom, but out in the hallway. And one of the things he had told the high school students is that's the first time he had ever really felt forgiveness. And after he spoke, I went down there, and he knew it was me when he saw me. And I mean, I just hugged him and we just cried. And I genuinely feel that he is remorseful for what he did, and that he is sorry and never expected it to go to that either. I mean, they were all going to split that money, but nobody really knew that what would happen.
What made you want to hug him in the hallway in the courthouse?
He was the only one that wasn't in prison, and he was the third hearing that we went to, sentencing that we went to. And I don't really know why. I just felt like I was supposed to go out there. And so I had been out there once already when they had the break, and then I sat down, and my friend sat down, and Jordan's dad sat down, and I just felt like I was supposed to go out there and see what he was doing. I went out there, and I walked past him, and he was standing around his friends and his girlfriend and family, and I just walked past him, and I just felt like I was supposed to hug him, and I just went up there, and I just cut in front of all his family and friends, and I gave him a hug, and he didn't let me go. I mean, we just hugged and hugged and hugged, and then I went to go away, and he just held my hands. And I know that when he spoke at the high school, he said that's the first time he'd ever felt true forgiveness in his life.
You were amazing. Okay, now let's talk about what you've been doing since then. Since there's 4 people or 5 people involved?
There is technically 5 people involved.
Talk about the relationships the conversations that you've had with several of them since.
Well, I have written letters back and forth with Brian and Kevin, and even just listening to their letters, listening to their stories, listening to their growing up. I mean, they're just boys that made wrong decisions. Some of them came from better homes. Some of them didn't come from as nice of homes. Brian was, by the age of 14, he was already the one who had to get the money to pay lot rent on their trailer. And I just reading their letters, I mean, I really feel they have a lot of compassion. They are truly sorry for what they did. And we just have written back and forth on, how their days are going. And, they certainly wish they weren't where they're at. They know they have to pay for what they've done. And they accept that. And, and I remember before the first sentencing, the state's attorney, Randy Sample, asked me, how much time do you think they should get? And I just felt like I can't do that. I can't tell them how much time they should get. But in my heart, I'll never forget when the judge first said 80 years, and I just went, and my friend next to me looked at me, and I'm like, oh my word. And then he, took off the 40, I forget the terminology, but, and then he, so before Trevor can be up for parole, he's got 20 years, and I just thought, that's a long time. I mean, he's got his mom and his dad and his brother, and I mean, I do feel when 20 years comes that he will make changes in his life. I mean, Trevor is making changes in people's life. He is in prison right now, and he is tutoring people to get their GED. He got his GED right after he went to prison, and he is tutoring people, and I feel that makes a huge difference for people's lives.
That's awesome. What have these letters meant to you? Did you initiate that? Did you write the first letter to them, or did they?
They actually wrote the first letter to me. And it has really meant a lot. I mean, they've told me about their faith. They've told me about, their relationships with God. I have a letter from Brian where he told me all the way from when he was a young child and his grandparents used to take him to church. he told me about when he was in jail and he looked in the mirror and he didn't know that man in the mirror. And then he took his shirt off because he said he had his stripes on, and he said he still didn't know that man in the mirror. And it was then that he asked God to come into his life and come into his heart. And he said he will always have God in his heart for eternity.
How many times would you say you wrote back and forth?
Oh, probably 30 or 40 times to each one, maybe more. I've gotten Christmas cards, birthday flowers.
From the outside looking in, do people who know this, I mean, what reaction have you gotten from people who do know that you carried on a relationship with these people for the past 5 years?
You know, some people are amazed, you know, and they're like, I don't know how you could do that. And I always try to put myself outside of it. And if this was happening to you, I'd be like, I don't know how you could do that. I would never write them letters. And I would say that, I mean, because you don't know. You never know what you're going to do until you're in that situation. And I mean, I love Jordan with all my heart. I miss him every day. Me and my family, we talk about him every day. But I just couldn't hold on to that anger. I mean, it just, for my own well-being, I mean, that anger or forgiving them just made my whole life just so much better and so much more complete, and that I'm able to forgive.
Is forgiveness a one-time thing, or is it something that you have to do every day? And do these letters help with that, learning more about them?
They really do. They do. They've written me letters, and, you know, and just, you know, I just feel like it could have so easily been Jordan, and just forgiving them is something, you know, sometimes I have to remind myself, you know, that I do forgive them, but I never feel that anger towards them. You know, I just don't have that anymore, and I just feel like they have definitely just made a difference in my life. You know, I certainly would want to have my son back here, you know, and then there's some people who, you know, who are kind of angry that I have forgiven them, and it's not a step they have been able to take yet, but in time, I hope that they can do that.
Has your example of forgiveness passed on to your daughter and your son, to Jordan's brother and sister?
Yes, it definitely has. I know that my daughter has been able to forgive some people in her life for things that have happened that she says she doesn't think she could have done if she hasn't seen that. And she has also been able to forgive each of these boys as well. And my son, he doesn't have that same anger either. And it's something we talked about, that I have forgiven him. And I mean, he's 10 years old right now, and hopefully it's something he just grows up with, knowing that, you know, it's okay to forgive.
Last couple of things. It's just, what do you hope that your interaction with Brian and Trevor and Kevin, what do you hope that this interaction, like, what are your hopes for their lives?
I really do. When they get out, you know, they'll be 50, 55. I really want the best for them. You know, I hope they can, you know, have a relationship with their families, and that their family will be there for them throughout these years. I mean, that's a long time. Their parents may not be around by then, or they could be, but it's a long time, and hopefully their family continues to visit them, and hopefully their family has forgiven them for the things they have done, because I know each one of them are hurting in their ways as well. So I just pray that, and most importantly, I pray that each one of them does have that relationship with Christ and spends eternity in heaven.
You are an incredible human being. I just can't even right now. Anything else that we haven't talked about that you think is important about this message of forgiveness? How has it changed your life? I mean, you've talked about that quite a bit, but is there anything else?
I think one thing that it makes a difference in is there's so many times where, you know, that something can happen in your life. And I mean, I think in my head, it's like, if I can forgive a murderer, I can forgive this person. You know, if, you know, my teenage daughter, you know, if there's something going on, and it's like, if I can forgive a murderer, I can forgive anything, you know, and that's what I think, you know. I mean, people at work, you know, that's, you know, if I can forgive a murderer, you know, some little off-the-wall comment is nothing, you know. And that's just how I have looked at it, is that, you know, if I can forgive a murderer, I can forgive this. And I've had people tell me that, you know, Carolyn can forgive that. I should be able to forgive this. And I hope that makes an impact on somebody's life, that they can forgive for small and big things. I have, you know, met with a couple other mothers who have lost their sons as well. And, you know, and I hope that can make an impact, that at some point in their life they're able to forgive the people involved in their son's murders.
Is that, I mean, is there a peace? Is there a, like, how do you, like, that feeling, that weight, anything like that? Like, what's the benefit of forgiving versus not?
I think the benefit is just the anger that goes away, and just the peace that you feel, just an overall feeling of peace. I mean, because the first year I would not have been able to sit here and talk to you like this, because we find it funny at home. We laugh about it now because, I mean, my kids will tell you, I was very angry. I was very mad. And just the peace that I have, and the peace that I can have with them, and just knowing that small things are small things, you know, just to be able to just have that peace. That's what it's given me.
I have way more than enough. Let's go, leave the microphone.